Today was not just a bad look for Wack 100. This was the kind of moment that makes people go back through old clips, old interviews, old live streams, and start asking whether this man has been talking too much for way too long. Because when your whole brand is built on confidence, pressure, and acting like you control every room, one shaky moment can turn into a full public unraveling. And to be fair right at the start, there is not one single recent interview that completely tells this whole story by itself. What really happened is a series of incidents that all fed the same narrative. A courtroom contradiction, a federal case orbiting his name, and a heated live stream where he looked more emotional than strategic. Put all of that together, and suddenly the Wack 100 got exposed. Title starts making a lot more sense. For years, Wack 100 has survived by being loud, fearless, and impossible to ignore. He built a reputation not just as a manager, but as a media character. He is tied to major rap names, has shown up in every messy conversation possible, and always talks like he knows more than everybody else in the room. That style works when you win the argument, but it gets dangerous when your own words start getting used against you. And that is where the first major crack showed up. Not on a podcast set, not in a random Instagram live, in a courthouse. Because once your media personality crosses into legal territory, the entertainment value disappears, and the contradictions start mattering a whole lot more. Back in the Keith D. Bail saga, Wack 100, whose legal name is Cash Jones, showed up connected to a very serious case. Keith D. was fighting for release while awaiting trial in the Tupac Shakur murder case. Wack told the court he had put up money as a gift and said there was no contract or business arrangement tied to it. On paper, that sounds charitable. In reality, that is exactly where things started getting ugly. Because prosecutors did not just listen to what Wack said in court and move on. They went back to his own public media trail. And that is where the real problem started. They pointed to a Vlad TV interview where Wack had talked about the possibility of bonding Keith D out with the idea of turning the situation into a series about his life. That immediately changed the way the entire situation looked. That was the exposure, not a rumor, not haters on social media, not some random blog twisting words. The court was told that Wack's public interview comments suggested a different motive from the clean gift story he offered at the hearing. And once that contradiction entered the room, the image of him as the smooth operator took a serious hit. It got worse because prosecutors also played a jailhouse phone call. And that call made the situation sound even more transactional. The message people took from it was simple. This did not sound like a man helping out of pure loyalty. It sounded like a man who saw a business opportunity sitting behind bars. That difference is exactly why the whole thing blew up. Now, to be precise, none of that proved Wack 100 committed a crime. That part needs to be said clearly. But it did something almost as damaging in the public eye. It made him look inconsistent. It made him look like one version of the story was for the camera and another version was for the courtroom. And once the public smells that, they do not let go easily. The judge ultimately denied Keith D's release, and the reporting around the hearing made Wack look like one of the biggest side stories in the case. Then, months later, the credibility issue did not totally disappear. In a separate 2025 AP report, the court's earlier skepticism around the claimed source of bail-related funds and related paperwork was still being referenced. That matters because it shows this was not a one-day embarrassment that instantly vanished. So the first way Wack got exposed was simple. His own interview style, talking, came back and collided with a legal setting where every sentence matters. That is a dangerous place for a media personality to be. Because once prosecutors can play your old content back to a judge, your whole brand changes. Now you're not the narrator anymore. You are evidence. Then came the second major cloud over his name. And this one was bigger because it touched street credibility instead of just courtroom credibility. In March 2025, the DOJ announced a sweeping federal case against Eugene Big U Henley Jr., alleging a mafia-like criminal enterprise involving serious crimes including murder, extortion, fraud, and more. The AP and DOJ reporting around the case made clear this was a massive federal move with major implications. Here is where Wack's problem got worse. Secondary reporting tied to that case said Wack 100's name appeared multiple times in the broader federal matter, and Big U reportedly accused Wack of helping federal authorities bring him down. Wack reportedly denied that. Now, I need to stress that carefully because in the source set I could review directly, that accusation and denial layer came through secondary reporting rather than every original post or full interview. But even as a reported claim, it was explosive, because in the kind of world Wack has spent years speaking to, perception is not a side issue. Perception is the whole game. You can beat an argument and still lose the room if people decide your name sounds too close to paperwork, prosecutions, or behind-the-scenes federal narratives. And once that kind of label starts floating around, even without hard proof, it spreads faster than a denial ever can. That is why this Big U chapter mattered so much. Not because it conclusively proved Wack did anything with law enforcement. It did not. But because it put him in a spot where he was no longer attacking people from the outside. He was suddenly the one being discussed, questioned, and politically dissected in the same ecosystem he usually dominates. And when that happens, people do not watch to be informed. They watch to see if you crack. They watch your face, your tone, your pauses, your overreactions. They watch to see if you stay smooth or start sounding defensive. That is how a public image gets reshaped in real time. Not by one court filing alone, but by what it does to the way every future appearance feels. Now let's get to the part that really gave this headline its heated interview energy. Because late in 2025, Wack 100 got into a live stream confrontation with Adin Ross over Kendrick Lamar. And this was not one of those calm, measured, strategic debates where a person walks in, makes a point, and walks out. This was emotional, direct, and made for clips. Exactly the kind of moment that can go viral for all the wrong reasons. According to the available reporting on that stream, Wack entered the conversation already heated and demanded that Adin Ross say, "Hail Kendrick." That line instantly made the moment feel bigger than a normal disagreement. It sounded theatrical. It sounded confrontational. And, depending on who was watching, it sounded either powerfully loyal or embarrassingly forced. That split in reaction is what made the clip travel. The confrontation centered on comments Adin had made about Kendrick Lamar. Wack challenged him aggressively and pushed him to justify what he had been saying. At one point, Wack reportedly asked Ross whether he had ever seen Drake do the kind of conduct people had been accusing him of, and Ross answered no. That moment mattered because the fight stopped looking like clean moral defense and started looking messy, emotional, and selective. And that is the second kind of exposure. The first exposure was contradiction. This one was composure. Because for a guy whose image depends on owning the room, a viral clip where you look reactive can hurt almost as much as a bad legal headline. People do not only ask whether you were right. They ask whether you looked in control. That is why the public response matters here. The available reaction sampling showed exactly what you would expect from a moment like this. Some viewers said Wack was defending Kendrick and checking reckless talk in real time. Others thought the whole thing looked like performative outrage and unnecessary chaos. And that second group is the one that matters for this headline, because they're the people who started saying Wack was spiraling. The social media reaction, at least in the sample that was publicly quoted in available coverage, ranged from mocking to dismissive to more analytical. Some users treated it like another episode in a never-ending rap content circus. Others focused on whether Adin had actually stood his ground or just dodged the deeper point. But what almost nobody treated it like was a clean W for Wack. That is the key. And once that happens, the comments section gets brutal. Because Wack 100 is not some neutral commentator. He is one of the most polarizing people in rap media. So when he looks inconsistent in court, gets dragged into federal adjacent accusations, and then blows up emotionally on a live stream, the audience starts threading all those things together. They stop seeing separate incidents. They start seeing a pattern. That pattern is what powers a title like this. Not one gotcha line. Not one viral screenshot. A pattern. The courtroom says one thing. The streets say another thing. The live stream says a third thing. And suddenly the same man who built his image on certainty starts looking like somebody constantly trying to get ahead of the next fire. who responded directly. In the cleanest verified sense, Aiden Ross pushed back in the live stream itself. Big U, according to reported secondary coverage, publicly put Wack's name into an accusation-heavy narrative after the federal case exploded. And in the Keefe D situation, prosecutors effectively responded to Wack by using his own public media words against the credibility of his court story. So even when celebrities were not all jumping in publicly, the pressure was still coming from multiple angles. Now let's talk reputation. Did this ruin Wack 100 overnight? No, that would be lazy analysis. Wack has built a career off chaos, and people like that often survive scandal much longer than people expect. Controversy can even feed the machine for a while. But survival is not the same thing as coming out clean. The real damage is more subtle. It is trust damage. It is the kind of damage where some people still tune in, but they tune in differently. They're not listening because they think you're the smartest guy in the room. They are listening because they want to catch the next contradiction. That shift is devastating if your power came from sounding bulletproof. Business-wise, the public evidence I reviewed points more toward indirect damage than an immediate collapse. I did not find a clean, publicly documented sponsor drops Wack headline in the reviewed source pool. But a manager or industry personality does not need a public sponsor loss to feel impact. If artists, collaborators, lawyers, interview platforms, or brand-adjacent partners start deciding you bring too much legal smoke or too much internet baggage, that is business damage too. So yes, collaborations and public-facing opportunities could be affected. Not because one company issued a glossy statement, but because this kind of reputational cloud changes how people calculate risk. And with Wack, the risk is not just that he says something wild. It is that his old words might resurface, collide with a legal matter, and create a whole new problem. That makes every appearance heavier. And that is why this title works, even if the reality had to be assembled from multiple moments. Wack 100 got exposed in 3 separate arenas. In court, where his old interview talk looked damaging. In the Big U fallout, where proximity to federal narratives hurt perception. And on live stream, where emotion overpowered discipline. Those are different stages, but they all damage the same character. Still, let's keep one line crystal clear before people run too far with this. None of the reviewed evidence proves Wack 100 committed the crimes people on the internet love to scream about. The strongest verified material here is about contradiction, perception, association, and public image damage. That is enough to write this script honestly. It is not enough to invent criminal conclusions. But that is also what makes this story so fascinating. He did not need a conviction to look exposed. He did not need a leaked document with his name circled in red. He just needed his own words, other people's accusations, and one bad viral confrontation to land too close together. That was enough to make the whole thing feel like the walls were closing in. So now the question goes to you. Was Wack 100 truly exposed? Or is this just another case of a controversial figure taking hits and still finding a way to stay loud? Do those courtroom contradictions matter more than the live stream meltdown? Or was that Aiden Ross clash the moment people finally started seeing him differently? Let me know in the comments, because this story is bigger than one argument. It is about what happens when a man who lives by the microphone starts losing control of the narrative.